Welcome into the one-on-one halftime report. I am Michael Leegan, your New York Jets beat reporter for WFUV Sports, with another season in the books for Gang Green. We here at WFUV thought it would be a good idea to do a little season recap, talk about some of the highs, talk about some of the many lows in what was a interesting, I will say maybe disappointing, but signs of improving season for the New York Jets. So here we are. We're going to look back on New York's 2021 season, and let's look at 5 key takeaways, if you will. So number one, the first takeaway I kind of want to talk about, and that is the development of Zach Wilson. Without a doubt, one of the biggest storylines coming into the season was rookie quarterback Zach Wilson. The Jets selected him number 2 overall in the 2021 NFL draft. And for a team that hasn't had a true franchise quarterback since Joe Namath, the question on everyone's minds coming into the season was, have the Jets finally found their guy? For a team that has used high draft picks on quarterbacks before, Ken O'Brien, Chad Pennington, Mark Sanchez, Sam Darnold, they brought in free agents, down and down and down. They're always looking for that guy. The question was, would Zach be any different? And while I can't sit here and tell you Zach is 100% without a doubt the guy, I think he's given you a lot of reasons to be hopeful. He's shown a lot of flashes that he can be a franchise quarterback. And one thing I can say for sure, he got a lot better as the season went along. On the year, Zach threw for 2,334 yards, 9 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. He also rushed for 4 touchdowns. Those numbers won't exactly jump off the stat sheet at you, but how about the fact that after he returned from a PCL injury, he came back in week 12, he missed essentially 5 games, if you want to include that Patriots game where he initially got injured, missed almost the entirety of that game. Zach accounted for 9 touchdowns combined, rushing and passing. He only threw 2 interceptions since coming back from injury. And in the final 5 games of the season, Zach threw no INTs. The only other quarterback to do that during that same stretch, throwing no interceptions, Aaron Rodgers. So, if you're a Jets fan, I think you should be very happy with what you saw out of Zach Wilson, especially after the injury. And, stats aside, he's made so many wow plays this season. You want to talk about a 50-yard touchdown run against the Jags, rolling out, throwing a touchdown bomb to Corey Davis, an insane play against Miami where they did a flea flicker across the field. Then he rolled around and found Ryan Griffin across his body. The bottom line is, whether you want to talk stats, the way he presents himself, the plays on the field, Zach gives you a reason to be hopeful. And Jet fans, I think you should be happy going into next season. So now let's talk about takeaway number 2. And that is this idea that the offensive rookies as a whole really shined bright this season. We already talked about Zach, but frankly, there are 3 other rookies who really deserve some mention. And frankly, I think played better than Zach. Not that Zach was bad, but these guys really showed out. And those are left guard Elijah Vera Tucker, the Jets' second first-round pick this past year, running back Michael Carter out of UNC, and then wide receiver Elijah Moore out of Ole Miss. They all should be key pieces on this for this Jets offense for years to come. Let's start with Elijah Vera Tucker, the first-round pick out of USC, the left guard. He was put on Pro Football Focus's all-rookie offensive line. We'll see if he gets any other accolades as we kind of wrap up the season here. But, he was one of the most consistent players all season long. He was often one of, if not the Jets' highest graded players coming out of games, when there's very few bright spots. Elijah Vera Tucker was always one of them. So, Jet fans, you should be very happy for him. He should be happy with him, He should be a stud of left guard for years to come. It's hard to grade offensive line play. There's not really stats like a receiver, quarterback, etc. But the eye test, the breakdowns, you look at different experts on Twitter. I recommend Brian Baldinger. He does great breakdowns of players. Check out some of his stuff on Elijah Vera Tucker, because Elijah Vera Tucker, let me tell you, one of the Jets' best rookies this year, just one of their best players, bottom line. So he's been great. Another offensive rookie I want to highlight, Elijah Moore. He also had a fantastic year. Unfortunately, he battled injuries at times. He missed the last 4 games of the season after being placed on IR with a quad injury. But he showed that he can be a real threat for this offense. He finished with 5 receiving touchdowns, a rushing touchdown. He actually accounted for 6 touchdowns in the last 5 games he played. Unfortunately, like I said, he missed these last 4 games of the season. But when he was healthy, especially that stretch he went on there in those 5 games from about week 9 to week 13, he was one of the hottest receivers in football. So look for him to kind of continue to break out next season. And then finally, if you're going to mention Jets offensive rookies, you have to mention Michael Carter, the running back. The Jets, of course, drafted 2 players named Michael Carter this year, one a cornerback out of Duke in the 5th round, and we'll talk about him in just a second. But they also took a running back, Michael Carter, in the 4th round out of UNC, as I mentioned earlier. He was a huge playmaker for the Jets this year, both in the running game and the passing game. Before I get to some stats, one of the things that always impressed me about Michael Carter was the fact that he always broke first contact, always able to, use his hands to get a defender off him, always kind of got positive yardage out of nothing, had some big runs this year. I was highly impressed by him throughout the season. Unfortunately, like Elijah Moore, he, battled injuries. Carter did. He missed some games throughout the season, but in 14 games, he finished with 639 rushing yards, 325 receiving yards, 4 rushing touchdowns. If he played the full 17-game season and was more involved in the offense earlier in the year, because of course the first 3 games, the Jets relied more on Tevin Coleman and Ty Johnson. He got more involved earlier on and he wasn't injured, we may have had a 1,000-yard rusher on our hands for the Jets. So let's see what he can do next year. Excuse me. Carter also was the first Jet since 2018 to rush for 100 yards in a game. Jets haven't had that in a while. He did that in a game against the Jags. So, hey, big shout out to him and those offensive rookies that I mentioned. It wouldn't be fair if I didn't mention the defensive side of the ball as well. The defense overall has been a disappointment for the Jets this year, but that kind of brings us to our third takeaway, which was a young secondary. But honestly, like I said, for a defense that was disappointing, they were a strength. At times this defense was gashed by opposing teams. They had a stretch where they gave up 40 plus points in 3 out of 4 games. So there was a lot of room for improvement. But this young secondary, highlighted by second-year man Bryce Hall out of Virginia, rookies Brendan Eccles out of Kentucky, Michael Carter II out of Duke, and Jason Pinhock out of Pitt, all played really well down the stretch. Going into week 18, Bryce Hall was second in the NFL behind only Marshawn Lattimore in forced incompletions. He had some great coverage down the field this year. He held Jamar Chase, DJ Moore, Stephon Diggs, Mike Evans, some of the top receivers in the NFL. He held them all to under 35 yards in the games that he played against them, which is fantastic. And you know what? Let's give some love to the rookies. I know Bryce Hall's a second-year guy. He's still very young, but how about the rookies? Brandon Eccles had a couple picks on the year, including a pick 6 and a pick off of Tom Brady. He also was the Pepsi Zero Sugar Rookie of the Week, for week 15. Several Jets received that honor this year, including Zach Wilson. He received it 3 times. And also Elijah Moore was Rookie of the Week once as well. So that's a good sign for the Jets. Michael Carter, the second, the corner, not the running back that we talked about earlier, but the corner, the slot corner. He was excellent in coverage this year for the Jets. And finally, how about Jason Pinnock? This is a guy, corner out of Pitt, later draft pick. He did not play for most of the year. When he did, he was really on special teams, some select coverage. He struggled in both areas. Rumblings, maybe. Obviously he's a late pick, so you don't want to say necessarily bust, but not really much to get you encouraged. And then, due to some injuries, due to some COVID issues, he was moved to safety for the Jets. They were desperate for some safety help. He played safety the last 3 games of the year, started due to injury, and became one of the Jets' highest graded defensive players. So, overall, that was a shock, but that was great. That was a great thing to see for the Jets. And overall, this young secondary, they were a great thing to watch this year. So much improvement down the stretch. So while the defense may have been poor, the secondary was a bright spot. How about takeaway number 4? The Jets need a pass rusher. And looking at this offseason, the Jets desperately need to make some additions. They need a true number 1 wide receiver. They need a tight end. They need to figure out who's going to start at right guard going forward, whether they want to bring back Laurent Duvernay-Tardif, who was a great midseason acquisition. They want to bring in someone else, draft someone, but one of their biggest needs is pass rush. And the Jets just failed to get any consistent pressure on opposing quarterbacks this year. And aside from some big games against the Titans and the Texans, the Jets were just never able to get to the quarterback. 6 sacks for Quinton Williams, 6 sacks for Jonathan Franklin Myers, who received an extension in season and frankly was disappointing after that. Those 2 guys, those are okay numbers for guys that play on the interior of the line most of the time, but you need more out of them. 2 sacks in a very limited capacity for Bryce Huff. You would have liked to see more. Obviously, he had injury issues. The Jets lost Carl Lawson before the year began. He was supposed to be their big pass rushing threat. So getting him back next year will be big, but they desperately need another threat and the true pass rushing threat to go along with Lawson. You don't know how he's going to be coming off the Achilles. So, Chandler Jones, Von Miller, both available in free agency this year. You got a guy like Aiden Hutchinson out of Michigan in the draft. Who knows if he falls to the Jets at 4, but we'll see what happens. Bottom line, the Jets need some pass rushing help. And finally, our last takeaway, number 5, Coach Saleh helping to change the culture. The Jets, this is a team that hasn't made the playoffs since the 2010 season, have endured some really rough years under Rex Ryan, Todd Bowles, Adam Gase, you name it. And, Saleh came in here, and talked about one thing, changing the culture. And Joe Douglas, the GM, has talked about this as well. And I'll say this about the Jets, they're 4-13 on the year. It's not a pretty record. There were some ugly moments in the season, but bottom line, through the ups, the downs, whatever you want to say, this team never quit. 2 of their 4 wins came against playoff teams, division champions in the Cincinnati Bengals, and they beat the number 1 seed Tennessee Titans earlier in the year. They went toe to toe with the Super Bowl champs, a game they honestly should have won. And, we won't get into that if you know what I'm talking about, but they should have won that game. They were only trailing the Bills in the last game of the season by 3 in the fourth quarter. They were in that game, and that comes after the Bills demolished the Jets early in the year, 45-17 back in November. So look, the Jets never gave up. They always fought, and that's a testament to Saleh. That's a testament to the coaching staff. Despite the injuries to key starters, Mekhi Becton lost week 1. LaMarcus Joyner, safety, lost week 1. Marcus May lost during the year. Corey Davis lost. Carl Lawson lost before the season started. This team remained energized. They fought all season long, and that is a credit to the coaching staff. That is a credit to Robert Saleh. And, look, 4 picks for the Jets this year in the top 50. They got picks at 4, 10, 35, 38. They got a ton of cap space. Let's see what they can do in the offseason to continue to improve the culture, improve the team, and see what happens. And finally, just some final shout outs, not necessarily a last takeaway, but I want to shout out Braxton Barrios. He was excellent this year, should have been a Pro Bowler, one of the top returners now in the NFL. He was a great receiver too. George Fant, another guy, honestly, should have been a Pro Bowler, a stud left tackle, probably one of the top 5 left tackles in football right now. He was fantastic, stepping in for Mekhi Becton all year. CJ Mosley, named Jets team MVP, a stud on defense. He made a lot of tackles, was really good for the Jets. And how about Eddie Pinero, late season acquisition at kicker? The Jets had struggled at the kicker position, all season long. He came in, and when he did, he never missed a kick. He should probably be back next year. So that is going to do it for this Jets season recap. Hope you all enjoyed it. It has been my pleasure covering the New York Jets for WFUV. Now let's send it back to Fordham basketball.